Every June, the same suitcase appeared by the front door. Soft blue, scuffed at the corners, packed by my mother with the same quiet efficiency she used for everything that involved getting me out of the way. I was 8 the first time I understood what it meant. My brother Jake stood in the driveway next to Dad's loaded SUV, new sneakers shining, already talking about the beach house they were renting. Mom kissed the top of my head and said, "Be good for Aunt Carol. We'll call." They never really did. I spent every summer of my childhood in Aunt Carol's little house on the edge of a quiet lake. While Jake posted pictures of turquoise water and matching family t-shirts, I learned how to make blackberry jam that didn't set quite right the first 3 times. I learned how to fix a leaky faucet. I learned that silence could feel like safety instead of rejection. Aunt Carol never once asked why my parents left me behind. She just handed me a wooden spoon and said, "Here, stir this. You're part of this kitchen now." I loved her for that. I also hated how much I needed it. By the time I was 16, the pattern was carved into me. School year. Try to be invisible so no one noticed how little I was invited into family plans. Summer. Suitcase. Long bus ride. Aunt Carol's porch swing. And the hollow knowledge that somewhere else my parents were laughing with the child they actually wanted. I used to sit on that swing at night and press my hands against my chest, trying to slow the ache. It never worked. Aunt Carol died the winter I turned 24. Heart attack. Quiet. The way she did most things. In her will, she left me the lake house and every recipe card she had ever written by hand. Jake and my parents were stunned. They had assumed everything would be split. Mom actually said, "But we were the ones who checked on her," as if the summers of free childcare counted as devotion. I moved into the lake house 2 months later. The first night I stood in the kitchen and cried until my throat hurt. Not just for her. For every June I had been left behind. For every photo I wasn't in. For the little girl who used to unpack that blue suitcase and pretend she wasn't counting the days until September. I started baking again because it was the only way the house still felt full. Blackberry jam, sourdough that took 3 days, lemon cakes that tasted like the summers I had survived. Neighbors started buying. Then people from the next town. I turned the front room into a tiny cafe. I called it Carol's Table. Within a year, it was the place locals brought their weekend guests. I photographed every plate myself. I wrote the story of each recipe on little cards. People cried when they read them. I finally felt seen. Jake visited once. He looked around, smiled the golden boy smile, and said, "Cute little hobby, Lil. Mom and Dad would be proud if they understood small businesses." Then he left and didn't come back for 8 months. When he returned, he had a binder and a pitch. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting at my own counter like he owned it. "Carol's Table has potential. Real potential. But you're limited here. I can scale it. Franchise model, better branding. I already talked to a couple of investors who love the family heritage angle. We keep your recipes, of course. You stay creative director. I'll handle the business side. Family first, right?" I told him no, clearly, firmly. He laughed like I had told a joke. 2 months later, I saw the Instagram post. "Coming soon, Hale Heritage Kitchen. Recipes passed down through generations, elevated for a new era." The logo used the same BlackBerry illustration I had drawn by hand. The first location was already under construction in the city, funded by our parents' savings, and a loan Jake had taken out using the lake house as partial collateral. He had somehow convinced a bank that the property was jointly controlled. I called my parents. Mom's voice was soft and tired. "Jake has the vision, sweetheart. You've always been happier small. This way the whole family benefits. Don't make it ugly." Dad simply said, "He'll cut you in once it's profitable." I hung up and sat on the porch swing until the sun went down. The old loneliness rose up so strong I could barely breathe. All those summers of being the extra child had only been practice for this. They still didn't see me. They still chose him. The next year was slow violence. Jake's restaurant opened with a glossy launch party I wasn't invited to. Reviewers praised the nostalgic family recipes. My cafe sales dropped as people assumed we were connected and preferred the shiny new version. Suppliers who had once been loyal started giving Jake better rates. I found out he had told them I was stepping back. My hands shook every time I opened the books. Some nights I stood in the kitchen long after closing and whispered to the empty room, I was here first. I was here first. It didn't stop the tears. I hired a lawyer named Priya who specialized in small business IP and inheritance disputes. She went through every recipe card, every dated photo of my early menu boards, every email I had sent suppliers before Jake appeared. She also pulled the full title history of the lake house. That was when we found it. Aunt Carol had not only left me the property, she had placed a restrictive covenant in the deed. The house could not be used as collateral, sold, or transferred without the written consent of the sole heir, me, for a period of 15 years after her death. The bank documents Jake had used were incomplete. He had never obtained my signature because he never thought he would need it. The loan was on shaky ground the moment anyone looked closely. Priya smiled when she showed me. He needs you now, and he doesn't know it yet. I waited. The call came on a Thursday in late spring, almost exactly the season the blue suitcase used to appear. Jake's voice was tight, stripped of charm. Lily, we have a problem with the financing. The bank is asking questions about the lake house. They need a signature confirming the collateral is clean. It's just a formality. Mom and Dad already agreed. Can you come by the restaurant tomorrow? I told him to come to the lake house instead. Bring our parents. Bring the papers. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon that smelled like rain and blackberries. Jake walked in first, folder under his arm, already talking. Look, this is simple. Sign the consent form. The loan stays solid, the restaurants keep growing, and we all win. I'll even put you on the operating agreement for 5%. I looked at my parents. Mom's eyes were already wet in that familiar way that meant, please don't make a scene. Dad stared at the floor. I opened the folder Jake handed me. Then I set it aside and placed my own documents on the table. The original will, the deed with the covenant highlighted, the dated recipe cards, the trademark registration for Carol's table that I had filed the year I opened, and a formal notice of unauthorized use of protected intellectual property. Jake's face drained of color. You can't be serious, he said. Those recipes are family recipes. They were Aunt Carol's, I answered. She left them to me, along with this house. The house you used as collateral without my knowledge or consent. The bank is going to find that out very soon, unless you make this right. Mom reached for my hand. I pulled it back. I spent every summer of my childhood here because the three of you preferred vacations without me, I said. My voice stayed steady even though my pulse was hammering. I learned how to build something from the only person who ever chose me on purpose. You don't get to take that too. Jake tried to argue. He raised his voice. He called me bitter. He claimed I was destroying the family. I simply repeated the terms Priya and I had prepared, a full public acknowledgement that the original recipes and concept belonged to Carol's table and to me, immediate removal of all copied branding, a licensing fee for any continued use of the recipes, paid quarterly with audit rights, and a permanent bar on using the lake house for any further financial instruments without my written approval. In exchange, I would sign the limited consent the bank needed so the existing loan would not be called in overnight, saving our parents from immediate financial disaster. Jake stared at the papers like they might disappear if he looked hard enough. Our parents sat in silence. For the first time in my life, neither of them rushed to defend him. He signed. His hand shook. Mom cried quietly. Dad looked older than I had ever seen him. After they left, I walked down to the water and stood there until the sun dropped behind the trees. The old ache was still present, but it no longer owned the whole of me. I had spent so many summers believing I was the leftover child, the one easy to ship away, the one whose absence made everyone else's vacation better. That night, I unlocked the cafe, turned on the lights, and baked until the sky turned pale. When the first customers arrived the next morning, I served them blackberry jam on warm bread and watched their faces soften. For the first time, the sweetness didn't taste like consolation. It tasted like something I had kept. I still open the lake house windows every June. Sometimes I sit on the porch swing and remember the blue suitcase. The memory still stings, but it no longer defines the shape of my life. I built a table in the place they kept sending me away. And when the people who left me behind finally needed a seat at it, I was the one who decided the terms.